Hi, hello everyone, and welcome to this video of the Exeter School on Urban Analytics in the Social Media Mining mini module. This video will be about the ethics of analysis based on social media data. We will be talking about ethics, which is a discipline dealing with investigating the moral components of human behavior. The crucial question of ethics is understanding whether human actions have right or wrong causes or consequences. Consider, for instance, whether it would be ethical to use social media data in order to profile online users, extract their preferences, and then target them with specific ads addressing their needs without asking for their consent. Would this be ethical according to you? Let's have a look at some aspects of social media ethics. And before we do this, let's have a look at this survey produced by Audi in the UK. 87% of the respondents to this survey felt it was important that organizations use data about users ethically. The researchers of this survey asked people, who do you trust? And in terms of percentages of targets of such trust, we see that people trusted the most the NHS, followed by banks and building societies, family and friends, central and local government, utility providers, and last, social media organizations. Only 3% of the respondents put their trust into an ethical management of social media data performed by social media organizations. I think this survey perfectly indicates how delicate the question of ethically addressing and managing social media data is. The key aspect of this, the key problem with social media data is that it appears to be public. In fact, social media data is often fully available. Like, for instance, tweets are accessible even to those that are not subscribed to Twitter. So then, is it ethical to employ public or easily obtainable social media data for any sort of purpose? We must remember that the data was produced by users that were enrolled in a given platform, that subscribed to a given platform. And if you are a social media user, you will know that when you subscribe to a platform, you must fill a user privacy license agreement and a data management agreement, which clearly indicates how the platform will gather, store, and process data as produced by human users. So then, before we, as a third party, can access this apparently public data, we need authorization from the platform that manages it. Platforms like Twitter have special agreements or application tracks that provide access to public data for works related to research. So for research purposes, it's easier to mine Twitter data. In fact, Twitter has the academic research product track, which is a program that lets researchers and data scientists apply to it in order to mine the stream of social media tweets. You will be hearing more about this in Dr. Pacheco's videos. It's very important to have an authorization for mining tweets, otherwise your account might be banned if you perform social media mining without authorization. Let's assume that we were successful, that we have to do a project related to understanding social media data and urban analytics. We did an application, our application was accepted, we can start mining social media data. Are we done? Do we need anything else? Well, yes. because we need to be sure that the data that we have is processed in ethical ways that do not violate people's lives. Remember the first video? In the first video, we mentioned that social media are mostly personal diaries that are shared with other users. Because of this personal, intimate component, the unethical usage of social media data can actually easily violate people's lives in different ways. For instance, we might violate the privacy of a user. We might use their data to infer their political beliefs or their orientation or their demographics or salary without them having explicitly shared this sort of information on social media. Social media could also be used in order to diffuse harmful perception. If we boosted the interactions of a certain type of accounts that promote specific correlations between vaccines and hoaxes, for instance, we might critically impair the adoption of vaccinations of people in vaccination campaigns. So we could diffuse harmful perceptions. We could also manipulate behavior. The social media component of the knowledge, the cognitive component of social media is so strong that whenever we search for knowledge on social media, we are influenced on two different levels. According to dual coding theory in psychology, reading a news can affect us on an emotional level, which is mostly instantaneous, so that we can get the same emotions that were portrayed by a certain piece, by a certain post, for instance. More complicated is the second level of contagion, which is called cognitive contagion. This cognitive contagion can change our beliefs about the external world, our cognition, our knowledge about our surroundings. A key example in this case is the scandal of Cambridge Analytica, which a few years ago used the way the timelines were assembled on Facebook to manipulate users' political behaviors without them being explicitly, consciously aware of that. In fact, cognitive contagion can act on a subconscious, subliminal level, and this is why it is particularly dangerous. So you will understand that accessing social media data and manipulating it can have deep repercussions over manipulating people and users online. Another way in which we could use social media data in a strongly unethical way would be to gather profiles, to profile users and then sell their information, for instance, their purchase history or their biases or their brand appreciations. We could gather this information and use it for market or for business purposes without the explicit consent of people. So this would be, again, a violation of their own personal data. So you see that there are multiple aspects in which social media data can be used to violate people's lives. This calls for additional resources and regulations and laws that can actually protect online users. In the UK, in 2018, the government announced its Data Protection Act to protect how any type of data, including social media data, how this data was ethically processed. And this announcement was due to the promotion of the General Data Protection Regulation, known also as GDPR, by the European Union in 2018. So you will see, checking the documentation online provided by the government, that the Data Protection Act in the UK requires for any study dealing with data to be to account for data, for information in such a way that this is used fairly, lawfully and transparently. It's used for specific purposes that are made explicit to participants. It is used in a way that is adequate and relevant and limited only to what it is necessary. Must be accurately used and kept up to date, kept for no longer than necessary, and handled in a way that ensures appropriate security. You will also see that users whose data is used must be informed about how their data is being used. They must be able to access their own data, have incorrect data updated or corrected. They also must exert the so-called right to oblivion. So in case they want, online users must be able to have their own data erased. Also, their data must be portable and stored in certain safe environments. So you will see that designing studies that deal with social media data is quite delicate, because the researchers and the data scientists involved in these studies must comply with these specifications and deal with the data in ethical ways that protect and regulate users. When we access data on online platforms, this agreement is solved, is guaranteed by the platforms that regulate social media data diffusion. For instance, Facebook and Twitter have their own data policies that must adhere with GDPR and with other data regulation acts. So then, it is extremely important to devise, even for research purposes, studies that agree with the ethical standards of the Data Protection Act in terms of respecting users' confidentiality, anonymity, and consent. Consent is provided by users whenever they enroll in a given platform and they become aware that their own data might be used for research purposes. Individual users should not be profiled for any identification, so this is what anonymity means. They should be anonymized, and the data that comes out of this should not be mapped onto individual specific users. This is what confidentiality means. These aspects, together with consent and with the right to oblivion, can be followed whenever we want to reshare data by using IDs rather than resharing the content on tweets. IDs are labels, tags produced by the Twitter system that uniquely identify each tweet or message or post on Twitter. Whenever we want to reshare content because we want to guarantee that a certain study is reproducible, we should reshare not the original content, which, remember, is under the protection of the platform, but rather we should actually promote and diffuse the IDs of the tweets that we used in our study. So if we want to investigate urban landscape in social media and we want to make our study reproducible by other researchers, we should share publicly a list of tweet IDs that should be then rehydrated. Rehydration is a technical term that means transforming the original ID into the tweet, into the specific tweet. Notice that users might erase their own tweets at any time, so rehydration in certain circumstances might not be possible. Okay, and so that's it for this specific aspect of ethics in social media mining. Thank you for your attention.